The automated gate sensors clicked on at exactly 6:45 a.m., just as I finished my morning coffee. Through my kitchen window, I watched as Sandra Holloway's pristine white Range Rover rolled up to my newly installed toll booth. Her perfectly manicured hand emerged from the driver's window, reluctantly dropping a crisp $5 bill into the weatherproof payment slot. The digital display on my phone chimed with another notification. $135 collected before 700 a.m. Not bad for a Tuesday morning. I took another sip of coffee and smiled to myself. The HOA president who thought she could seal off my ranch entrance was about to learn an expensive lesson about property rights and private easements. My name is Daniel Morrison, and I've owned the Sunset Ridge Ranch for 12 years. It's a modest 40-acre property on the outskirts of Pine Valley, where I run a small equine therapy practice for disabled children. The ranch sits between the main highway and the newer development called Meadowbrook Estates, a cookie-cutter subdivision of 92 homes governed by the most aggressive HOA I've ever encountered. The trouble started 3 months ago when Sandra Holloway became the new HOA president. She introduced herself at my property line with a clipboard and a measuring tape, informing me that my ranch entrance was quote-unquote an eyesore that violated the neighborhood's aesthetic standards. I politely explained that my property predated their subdivision by 60 years and wasn't subject to their rules. She responded by saying that everything visible from their properties fell under their jurisdiction. That should have been my first warning. 2 weeks later, I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery. A construction crew was installing massive wrought iron gates across my driveway entrance, not beside it or near it, but directly blocking my only access to the public road. Sandra stood there in her power suit, directing workers like a general commanding troops. When I confronted her, she said with a condescending tone that the HOA had voted to secure all access points for safety reasons. She handed me a laminated card with an access code and told me I could use it between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. only. Outside those hours, I would need to request special permission. I immediately called the sheriff's department. Deputy Jackson arrived within 20 minutes, took one look at the situation, and shook his head. He told Sandra that blocking a private easement was illegal, but she produced a stack of documents claiming the HOA had acquired rights to control all connecting roads. The paperwork looked official enough that Deputy Jackson said it was a civil matter and I'd need to resolve it in court. Sandra smirked as he drove away, clearly believing she had won this round. That night I did something I rarely do. I dug through my filing cabinets and pulled out every document related to my property, the original deed from 1958, the survey maps, the easement agreements, everything. And that's when I found it, the smoking gun. My property's entrance wasn't just a private driveway. It contained a deed public easement that provided the only legal access for the entire Meadowbrook Estates to reach the county road. The developers had never created their own entrance. They had simply assumed my road would always be available. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Tom Garrett. After reviewing the documents, he laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. He said this was the clearest case of a legal obstruction he'd seen in 30 years of practice. But instead of immediately filing an injunction, Tom suggested something more creative. He asked if I wanted to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. I told him I was all ears. We filed the proper paperwork with the county to establish a private toll road on my property. Since the HOA had effectively landlocked themselves by blocking my entrance with their gate, they had created a situation where the only legal access to their homes now required crossing my land through a different point. I hired a crew to cut a new entrance 50 ft to the left of their fancy gates, completely on my property, and installed an automated toll collection system. The setup was completely legal, properly permitted, and recognized by the state as a private property access fee collection point. The toll schedule was simple. $5 for regular cars, $10 for SU versus trucks, and $20 for any vehicle displaying an HOA board member sticker. Commercial vehicles like delivery trucks and service vans paid $15. I offered monthly passes for $200 or annual passes for $2,000. The best part was that the system photographed every license plate, so anyone who tried to run the toll would receive an invoice in the mail with a $50 processing fee. The first morning after installation was chaos. Residents lined up at my toll booth, honking and shouting. Several people called the police, but Deputy Jackson returned, reviewed my permits, and confirmed everything was legal. He even paid his $5 with a grin. Sandra herself refused to pay for 3 days, attempting to use the old entrance despite her own gates blocking it. Finally, when she realized she'd miss an important real estate showing, she practically threw a $20 bill at the machine. The revolt began within a week. HOA members started calling emergency meetings, demanding Sandra remove the gates. She insisted she had acted within her authority and that I was the one being unreasonable. But when residents calculated they were spending $1,500 to $200 per month just to leave their homes, the mood turned ugly. A recall petition started circulating. Sandra tried to use HOA funds to sue me, but the lawyer they consulted told them they had no case and would likely owe me damages. The situation escalated when a local news station picked up the story. The segment titled David vs. Goliath HOA went viral within hours. My toll booth, which I decorated with a small cowboy hat and a sign saying, "Howdy Neighbors," became an internet sensation. People started driving out just to take selfies with it. I sold merchandise with slogans like, "Don't mess with property rights," and "Hey means homeowners awful." The proceeds went to my equine therapy program, which only made Sandra look worse in the court of public opinion. 3 weeks into what locals called Tollgate Gate, Sandra made a desperate move. She had the HOA's maintenance crew attempt to build a dirt road around my property to connect with the county road. Unfortunately for her, that land belonged to the State Forestry Service. She was issued a cease and desist order and fined $15,000 for unauthorized construction on protected land. The fine had to be paid from HOA funds, which meant a special assessment for all homeowners. The breaking point came during a packed HOA meeting where Sandra tried to propose a $1,000 special assessment per household to fund legal action against me. The crowd erupted. Robert Dalton, a retired judge who lived in the subdivision, stood up and explained in detail how Sandra had violated multiple laws and exposed the HOA to massive liability. He moved for an immediate vote of no confidence. The vote was 78-3, with only Sandra and her 2 closest allies supporting her. But Sandra wasn't done. She tried to claim the vote was invalid because proper notice hadn't been given. That's when Margaret Foster, the HOA secretary, produced recordings of Sandra, specifically instructing her not to send notices about the meeting to certain residents who opposed her. This was a violation of the HOA's own bylaws and potentially a criminal matter. The room went silent as everyone realized the legal implications. The next day, Sandra was served with multiple lawsuits. Individual homeowners sued her personally for damages caused by her unauthorized actions. The HOA board sued her for breach of fiduciary duty. I filed my own suit for harassment, trespassing, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Her homeowner's insurance refused to cover her because her actions were intentional and malicious. She was looking at potential personal liability, exceeding $500,000. The district attorney's office also opened an investigation into potential charges of fraud and abuse of power. Sandra had apparently used HOA funds for personal expenses, including a vacation to Hawaii that she claimed was for an HOA conference that didn't exist. The forensic accountant found over $30,000 in questionable expenses over her 2-year tenure. She was formally charged with embezzlement and fraud, both felony charges carrying potential prison time. During her arraignment, Sandra broke down crying in court. She pleaded not guilty, but was released on $50,000 bail with conditions including no contact with any HOA members and surrender of her passport. The judge also issued a restraining order preventing her from coming within 500 FT of my property. The local newspaper ran a front-page story with her mugshot under the headline, HOA President's Power Trip Ends in Criminal Charges. The resolution came swifter than expected. Facing mounting legal bills and criminal prosecution, Sandra agreed to a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to misdemeanor misuse of funds and was sentenced to 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and ordered to pay full restitution of $48,000 to the HOA. She was also permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. As the judge read the sentence, Sandra's expression shifted from defiance to complete devastation. Realizing her reputation and real estate career were effectively